Dr. Jack Wolfson, cardiologist. This is the Healthy Heart Show. Welcome to the Healthy Heart Show. And today I am just so excited to dive into healthy water and hydrogen water with my expert from the Molecular Hydrogen Institute. We have Tyler LeBaron with me. Tyler speaks all over the world. He is just an authority on hydrogen and how important it is, hydrogen water, and how we're all deficient in it, frankly. But Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and help shed some of the awareness on molecular hydrogen research.
Tell me how you got into molecular hydrogen.
Well, back in 2009, I came across an article that was published in Nature Medicine, and it was on hydrogen gas being therapeutic, and that was important because Nature Medicine is one of the most respected peer-reviewed scientific journals. Very, impact factors, 27 or something. So very prestigious journal. And in this article, they basically found that by cutting the blood supply to the brain, inducing a middle cerebral artery occlusion. So cut the blood supply to the brain, and then it in turn would cause an ischemia reperfusion damage, right? So lots of free radicals. There's no blood supply. So you'd have a severe damage, and of course that would damage the brain. And when they used hydrogen gas, just actually 2%, so that's below the flammability level. When they used just 2% hydrogen gas, that markedly suppressed the brain damage in this animal model. And they also found they could simply dissolve hydrogen gas into water, even though it has a relatively low solubility. They could dissolve it into water, and this was also therapeutic and protective. And so this really got me curious because hydrogen gas is just this, inert molecule, pretty much in terms of biological processes, but yet it's having these therapeutic effects. And so that's really got me excited and going when I came across that article in 2009, and then I was able to.
Let me ask you this: Why were you reading Nature Medicine in 2009? Why were you even doing that?
Well, yeah, I've always been interested in health and longevity, wellness, just exercise performance, and all of that's been something very, very big for me, right? And trying to find things we could do, interventions such as exercise, fasting, or other things that are more natural and safe, if you will. I always try to keep my eyes out for that as much as possible. And I came across alkaline ionized water actually back in this time in 2009, and I heard so many ridiculous anecdotal testimonials, but there were so many of them that I'm like, what is going on? It doesn't make sense that alkaline water could have these benefits, because alkaline it's not a buffer, right? 1 teaspoon of baking soda, which is the body's natural buffering system, can neutralize more acid than over 700 liters of an alkaline water at a pH of 10. So I was just curious, and so I started looking into this, and I found it was this electrolyzed reduced water or this ionized water, and they do electrolysis of water to make their alkaline water. But I looked at the literature, and there was, some articles showing that this water could have these therapeutic effects, but the mechanism was not explained. But then it turned out that it was because when you do electrolysis of water, which by definition is the decomposition of water to hydrogen and oxygen, it was the hydrogen gas responsible for therapeutic effects. And so it was trying to understand this area, this alkaline ionized water, that brought me to researching hydrogen gas. And when I came across that article, I was like, there it is. That's the secret. That's the key.
So the typical electrolysis method where you would create what would be called alkaline water, that actually is going to be removing hydrogen gas as well, and therefore actually make it even more dangerous.
Well, it depends on how it's done. So first off, when you do the electrolysis of water, you add the electrons into the water, and those electrons produce hydrogen gas. So you can see, if you drop a battery into water, for example, you see bubbles coming off of the negative and positive side. At the negative electrode, you're going to be producing that hydrogen gas and hydroxide ions, which is very alkaline. And they basically have a membrane that separates the two compartments, the two electrodes, so you have the alkaline water. Well, then that hydrogen gas, if it stays dissolved in the water and is consumed, that hydrogen gas could actually be therapeutic for you. What you don't know is maybe the what the hydroxide concentration is, or maybe a very high pH, for example, or maybe even degradation of the electrode material. Then you have these, electrode contaminants, for example, into your water. Those types of things could be damaging, but the hydrogen gas could be beneficial. But if you talk to those who are major advocates of drinking alkaline ionized water, they'll tell you that in order to get the benefits, you have to drink the water fresh. It has to be right out of that machine, pretty much, or else the benefits really are just go down. And in fact, people report, and you probably heard people talk about even negative effects of drinking alkaline ionized water. But the reason why drinking it fresh, people get the benefits, is because that water still contains the hydrogen gas before it dissipates out.
Got it. Got it. Makes perfect sense. Now, so you talk about, back from 2009, and they were talking about that ischemia reperfusion. So you've clamped down a vessel, and now you let blood flow again. You typically get a lot of oxidative stress, free radical damage that's there. And therefore, the hydrogen gas would be actually beneficial because it is such a tremendous antioxidant. The same thing should apply in a cardiac model where you do have a coronary artery occlusion or the blockage of a coronary artery, whether through spasm or from plaque rupture. And then you get some, either the body opens up the blood vessel on its own, which is natural fibrinolytics, or you go to a cardiac catheterization lab and one of my cardiology buddies opens it up with angioplasty and stent, but you still have that ischemia reperfusion. Any literature on the benefits of hydrogen gas or supplementation in that group?
Yeah, it's actually a growing area. We still have a lot more research, to be done to really show just how effective it is, the best ways of administration. But actually, the preclinical studies in animals, in pigs and dogs, for example, show some really good benefits. And so they started some early clinical studies, and also there was good benefits. And so now they're in Japan. They're doing a major study, 360 patients with 10, 15 different major hospitals. And in order to do this major study, they've actually gotten the approval, the official approval from the Japanese government for hydrogen gas as an advanced medicine for the treatment of post-cardiac arrest syndrome. Mm-hmm. So now people can use this hydrogen therapy, and they've done some pretty cool studies already. So first, the safety, that's the first and foremost, which we can talk about later. But the safety has been shown to be totally fine. But to put this in context, the typical treatment for a post-cardiac arrest syndrome is a hypothermia. So let's say, for example, as you know, if they're going to do a surgery on the brain or wherever, and they need to stop the heart, then they'll stop the heart, and then when they start the heart back up, that's going to cause the exact same problem you talked about with the ischemic perfusion, the blood perfusion again. And hypothermia is very effective. When you cool down the body, or the brain, or whatever it is, you cool everything down, and then you let the blood go back in, then the metabolism is a lot lower, as you produce a lot less free radicals. The oxidative stress is a lot lower. And when you compare a hydrogen therapy to this hypothermia, hydrogen gas is essentially just as effective, and in some cases more effective. Additionally, you get a benefit because hydrogen gas also can help attenuate inflammation, so decreasing the various pro-inflammatory proteins like cytokines, interleukin-6, for example, and it can actually decrease this inflammation, whereas a normal hypothermia doesn't really have that effect. So to your question, absolutely, the research is becoming more and more positive that hydrogen gas could be great for this area of all the cardiovascular system.
What and in those studies, how are they typically doing that? Are they given hydrogen gas through IV? Are they people breathing it? Breathing it in, and that could be through through a ventilator when people are unconscious after an event, or if they're using animals? How are they typically getting this in?
Yeah, so it depends. There's so many ways to administer the hydrogen gas. Inhalation, so if you have like a nasal cannula, for example, or a face mask, or the ventilator idea, those are some of the ways that's being done in terms of getting the hydrogen gas for the inhalation. In the animal studies, we actually make a sealed box, and then we pump in the mixture of basically hydrogen and oxygen so we can keep the concentration and then we have them stay in that box for 1 to 3 hours, so they're getting that inhalation of hydrogen gas. That's how it's typically being done in those studies using inhalation. But simply taking hydrogen gas and dissolving it into water is also a major way. In fact, that's probably the most common way that's being done both in research and in the market, because it's really quite simple, by simply drinking hydrogen-rich water. So those are the two main methods: inhalation of hydrogen gas and the drinking of hydrogen-rich water, or water that contains dissolved hydrogen gas.
Okay, so how do we get hydrogen gas into the water? How do we do that?
So several ways. I mean, with researchers, we typically have a tank of hydrogen gas, and we are able to connect it under pressure and bubble or infuse hydrogen gas into our water, our distilled water, whatever the control water we're using. Then we infuse it with hydrogen gas under pressure. So that's how we do it. But there's other ways on the market that make hydrogen water. There is even electrolysis devices, for example, that will make hydrogen gas and separate, but actually doesn't change the pH at all, because they use a proton exchange membrane basically to prevent elevation of pH, and that can make hydrogen gas. There are ready-to-drink hydrogen products also on the market, which you have to be somewhat cautious with, because hydrogen gas is the smallest molecule in the universe, right? So it can immediately dissipate through your plastic containers, and so any type of hydrogen product that's stored in a plastic container, it's not going to have a very long shelf life. So you just have to make sure that the product that you're looking at actually contains molecular hydrogen, right? So there's just infusing. There's electrolysis devices. There's several types of tablets, for example. You can just drop into the water, and the reaction reacts with the water to produce hydrogen gas, and you can see the hydrogen gas effervescing from the tablet reaction. So, and that's very simple, so those are probably the main ways in the market people are getting hydrogen water. And in the research, we either use those products, like we actually did a clinical study using these hydrogen-producing tablets, and there's another one that I'm involved with the non-alcoholic fatty acid liver disease, a clinical study in Europe. And so the tablets are a great way, but then when you're looking at the like for animal use or cell culture or something, often we just dissolve hydrogen gas under pressure into the water.
Explain how hydrogen gas is an antioxidant. Explain that. What do you mean?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So typically when we think of an antioxidant, we have this image in our mind that this antioxidant is donating an electron to some free radical, right?
Yep.
And that can be an antioxidant for sure, but a better definition of an antioxidant is simply a molecule that improves the redox status of the cell. Okay, that's the main goal. So even ozone, for example, which is not a reducing agent, it's a very powerful oxidizing agent. Ozone therapy could result in an antioxidant status, an improved antioxidant status. Or exercise is a really good example. When we exercise, we produce a lot more free radicals, but in the end, we actually have a higher antioxidant self-defense system because we have higher levels of glutathione, superoxide dismutase, all of these endogenous or our body's own antioxidant self-defense system. So molecular hydrogen doesn't really act as a direct radical scavenger like maybe conventional antioxidants, but it's more of a signal modulator. So it's able to increase those our body's own antioxidants like glutathione and superoxide dismutase, similar to how exercise would. It activates a pathway called the NRF2 pathway, and so NRF2 is a transcription factor, and it regulates over 200 different genes that are cytoprotective, anti-apoptotic, that are anti-inflammatory, just a lot of good benefits, detoxification, antioxidation, and so on. And hydrogen gas is somehow able to activate this pathway, and now we have an increase or an upregulation of our body's natural antioxidants to help combat that oxidative stress. And so that's one of the ways that hydrogen gas exerts antioxidant-like effect is because it regulates our body's own antioxidant homeostasis.
So yeah, so it's a lot more complex than it's just like you said, just an electron, a donor, on the surface. Obviously, it's affecting so many different pathways. Okay, so we find a good hydrogen gas in the tablet form, or something that produces hydrogen gas when it's dropped into water. Who should take it? Obviously, it sounds like it's like this miracle product that everybody should be on, and that's probably the simple answer, which you as the head of the Molecular Hydrogen Institute probably says, yeah. Well, let me say this. Is there anybody at all who should not use hydrogen tablets?
I guess those who don't want to. I mean,
or I guess, someone who's like, if you've had an allergy to hydrogen tablets before, don't do it again. Okay, so we got that clarified. So what we're going to say is it would benefit everybody. Who does it benefit the most?
I think we still need more research to really understand what types of populations are going to be the most benefited. Clinically, when we look at things, and really, I guess anecdotally, just because there's so much people using this and these reports, but it does seem to be those people who suffer, well, let's put it this way, those people who are the most out of homeostasis, right? So they have more severe metabolic syndrome, they have more, disease states, if you will, where they're suffering more than their normal counterparts, right? They typically experience greater effects. I mean, when we look at some of the studies that are quite powerful, for example, mild cognitive impairments, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, there's some of the clinical studies, again, they're small, but I mean, they range from, 20 to 100 patients, from, a few weeks to over a year long, showing some really good neurological benefits. And those people who have these disorders, per se, are going to benefit greater, which I guess would make sense because, if you take somebody, for example, your glucose levels need to be, let's say around 80 milligrams, 85 milligrams per deciliter or something, then you don't, if you take hydrogen, you hope that your glucose levels don't get any lower than that, right? You want to keep them in that range. But if you're a diabetic and have very high glucose levels, 400 or 500 or something, very high, then of course you hope that by taking molecular hydrogen, those levels will decrease. And we see that in some of the clinical research, for example, and some of the patients with metabolic syndrome, we saw some really good effects at increasing, improving cholesterol levels, HDL levels, your glucose homeostasis, glucose tolerance, and so on.
How much hydrogen in tablet form does Tyler LeBaron take on a daily basis?
Well, we could calculate it out because hydrogen gas, so it's 2 grams per mole, and so what we have to do is calculate the dosage. Because I get hydrogen from so many different ways, right? Whether I'm just in the laboratory and I'm like, oh, I'll go ahead and inhale some of this or drink some of that, right? So I guess if I calculated it, I get anywhere from none. Sometimes I don't take hydrogen because I'm busy or whatever reason, to maybe up to 20 milligrams of hydrogen a day, which I guess in tablet form, that's like taking, let's see, I'd have to do some math here. So this is the molar mass of magnesium. Let's see.
Well, give me roughly.
So yeah, I'm just trying to do some calculations because you have to look at the volume of water you're drinking and what the concentration is and what that would account to in a dose. And so I guess that would equate to around probably 1 tablet, probably less than probably like half a tablet, I guess, actually, to up to like 6 tablets a day.
On a daily basis. Okay,
yeah.
So essentially what you're saying, obviously maybe if you have more disease, if you have more sickness, as we've mentioned, whether it's diabetes or cognitive dysfunction or any significant cardiovascular or autoimmune or gut issue, maybe you want to try and reach for more of it, yet if you're on the healthier side, maybe not quite as much, but roughly hitting that range of kind of 1 to 2 tablets on a daily basis.
Yeah, and when we look at the clinical studies, for example, the lowest amount is around a half a milligram of hydrogen per day to be effective in those conditions and those studies with that population. And there doesn't always appear to be a dose response in every disease. In some diseases or some conditions, there does seem to be a dose response effect. But the important thing is a high dose of hydrogen is, as far as what we know so far, isn't ever less effective than a lower dose, right? And so kind of the idea is getting a high dose assures the highest probability of you getting a benefit. And I think we apply that even with exercise. Exercise and disease models are very similar because they both have higher levels of oxidative stress, of inflammation, and other issues. And we see greater benefits often in exercise with higher doses. And sometimes that can also be applied. I know for me personally, I don't really experience any significant benefits from molecular hydrogen. Like I'm like, wow, I take that and I'm just, so, in the zone or something. However, I do like to exercise and train hard. And when I do push myself really hard, I'm really kind of out of homeostasis and I take high doses of hydrogen, that's when I tend to believe I feel it the most, right? So again, that's more anecdotal, and there are some clinical studies to support that as well, but certainly more needs to be done.
All right, so if you're a very active person, endurance athlete and stuff like that, what do you want to take? Are we talking about 3 to 4 tablets a day of whatever your recommended brand is?
Well, I don't have any I don't recommend anything.
No, I'm saying, in general. At the end in the show notes, I'll put in what I recommend. But yeah,
I think that because hydrogen gas is really is safe, and we don't have enough research. I think the best advice is to take 1 or 2 tablets and just continue to increase that, until you start feeling an effect. For me, I feel it the most when I take like six tablets or so. That's when I start to get an effect. If I'm taking, with the tablet form, maybe a different form, I have to do something else, right? But I'm just trying to put this, for your audience in that regards. But I think, I guess one thing to be consider, the tablets have magnesium, right? And so most people are deficient in magnesium anyways. We need like 400 or 500 milligrams around the RDA for that. So I guess, it's possible you could take too much magnesium. So you just, I guess if you're sensitive to that area, you just want to just calculate how much magnesium you're taking. But I think 1 tablet only contains around 80 milligrams or so. So it's quite a mild dose,
right,
compared to all the other magnesium supplements out there even.
Okay, so if you get diarrhea from your hydrogen tablets, it's probably from the magnesium. If you're on dialysis, do not listen to this episode. And truth be told, from what I know about Tyler is actually 85 years old, so he looks pretty darn good from all the hydrogen that he's doing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as so it really sounds like there's no overdose, possibilities with probably the only downside really from what we're talking about is maybe hydrogen products can be a little bit expensive for the quality stuff, and you always remember, you get what you pay for. And I'll put a product that that we use, with the doctor's Wolfson, what we recommend, and I've only been using it really for a few months, and I like you, I necessarily don't feel any better from it. But I don't want to wait for disease to happen to me. I've seen disease happen to people. Everybody's healthy until the day that they're not. So why not be proactive? And I got to be honest with you, I kind of like the way the water tastes when I put the hydrogen tablets in there. I think it gives it a little bit of that effervescent, type of bubbly feel. Maybe if somebody could invent a product, and maybe somebody has, and I know there's a lot of different stuff that's out there, but one that kind of gives it like that lemon lime, kind of flavor, effervescent. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, lots of areas to continue considering with that area for sure. I agree though with hydrogen gas, it is a lot on the prevention. I think that's really where it's at. And we look at the studies, for example, a lot of times we want to do pre-treatment. And when we do pre-treatment of hydrogen therapy, we see some really good effects. So we do pre-treatment, and then we give the cells or the animal or whatever a stress, and that was really good. So, like for example, in Parkinson's disease, some of the first studies that came out in animals, they actually gave hydrogen water for so many weeks, and then they induced a stress, a chemical, to damage the substantia nigra in the brain to cause Parkinson's disease. But those rats that were drinking hydrogen-rich water, they completely prevented them from developing the Parkinson's disease, essentially.
Wow.
You know, so, and we look at other studies like, you know, there's some cool studies in cell culture also that have been done that are prevention. So you administer the hydrogen gas, you dissolve it into the cell media at physiological concentration, so around 20 micromolar or so, which is about what we get after we ingest hydrogen water. And we see that about if we did that first and then we expose the cells to some common plastic pesticide or some whatever it is, that the hydrogen gas is able to actually maintain a normal homeostasis of, say, inflammation or redox balance or the NAD plus to NADH ratio. So many different things we're able to maintain at that homeostatic level by this pre-treatment of hydrogen gas. Of course, we can't do this so well in clinical studies like, hey, this person is going to suffer from a heart attack, right, or whatever, so we do a pre-treatment, of hydrogen gas this way. There's no way to really do that, but we can do that in animal studies and cell studies, and we see that this idea of prevention, hydrogen gas is very good. So I guess you can think about it like this: when you wake up in the morning, you don't know what's going to happen that day, you don't know what you're going to be exposed to, you don't know what accidents might happen, but maybe by simply taking molecular hydrogen, that's going to potentially mitigate damages that would happen later on.
How does molecular hydrogen tablets taste in coffee? Have you ever dropped it into coffee? I don't know if you're a coffee drinker or not, but and I haven't tried that. I do like my cup or two of organic coffee in the morning. So I guess I'll have to try it and see for myself.
Yeah, I personally don't drink coffee, but I think the one thing you have to consider, I know some people do that, but the one thing you have to consider is because hydrogen is just a gas, if you put it in the hot coffee, then it might dissipate out a little bit too fast before you end up ingesting it, right? So, but I guess it doesn't have to be hot either. I guess people have, sometimes the coffee is cold, right?
So, all right, so, I mean, typically before I drink coffee in the morning, I drink about 16 ounces of water beforehand, get rehydrated, from the night and stuff like that. So I'll make sure I do that in the morning as well. As far as, because obviously I'm thinking about people with leaky gut, and sometimes healing leaky gut can be difficult, and it's still, there's this inflammation, there's this gut inflammation that's there. Do you really see a role of hydrogen tablets in the healing of the leaky gut?
I think more research needs to be done, but I think there's some interesting suggestive research in that area. Whether it's the inflammation in the gut, for example, there's some research showing that simply ingestion of hydrogen-rich water, even inhalation for that matter, can help improve the gut barrier and the gut layer, and actually there's some that even suggest improving the microbiome, right? Getting that back to the homeostasis. Because actually if we have a healthy flora, our healthy flora should produce hydrogen gas, several liters, up to 10 liters of, a couple of gallons of hydrogen gas a day. But the high use of, antibiotics, not as much fiber, all these things, of course, that's going to decrease the amount of hydrogen gas that's naturally produced. But when we take high doses of hydrogen-rich water, we're getting that high intermittent exposure very quickly, and that does seem to improve the whole gut lining issue and things. More research needs to be done in that area, because I think it is potentially one of the important targets of hydrogen water, and helps to maybe explain why hydrogen water may give different results than inhalation.
Mm-hmm. So it all goes back to the gut microbiome. How shocking. And my wife told me that, in 2005, she's like, it's about the gut and the gut microbiome, totally. Any research, though, on those Parkinson's patients, shift gears on you back a little bit to where we were before, but Parkinson's patients and hydrogen water, anything, because that should be easy enough to do. I mean, you take 10 patients here, 10 patients don't get the hydrogen-rich water, and symptoms improve over here, right? Shouldn't it be that easy?
Yeah. Well, some of the first clinical studies were actually done on Parkinson's disease, because the animal studies are there's quite a few of them, and they're really quite impressive. And so quickly there were clinical studies that was done. I think the first one was published in 2013, and it was small. It was maybe 80 or 90 patients or so, about 48 weeks long. But in that first study, there was a great improvement actually for those drinking hydrogen-rich water. Now, there was a study that was just completed, and it was 3 years long, and it was a couple hundred patients. Maybe actually it wasn't a full 3 years. But this is an interesting study because in this case, if you look at the study, in this case, it would actually suggest that maybe hydrogen water wasn't very effective because there was no difference between the hydrogen water and the placebo. Now, but if we actually analyze the data, and I'm fortunate enough to have been involved in the hydrogen research that had many conversations with some of the other researchers in Japan on this. And this is a very interesting story. It's very unfortunate, one of the most unfortunate things that happens in science from time to time. When they prepared the hydrogen water and the placebo, they try to do such a good job as researchers to make sure that it was a good placebo product and undistinguishable between the researchers and those drinking it, that the placebo actually ended up having hydrogen gas in it. And that could be anywhere from 0.1 ppm up to 1 ppm even, actually. And so the placebo water had molecular hydrogen in it as well. And so when they looked at the results, there was really no difference between the placebo and the hydrogen water. But this is the interesting thing. When they looked at the trend, so in Parkinson's, you just continue to trend down, 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 right? And so when you looked at how long this study went for, and you compared how much decrease there was in this study compared to the other studies that also went the same amount of time and how far they decreased. Wow. The decrease in other studies was 3 times more than the decrease in this study. And so it may suggest that actually hydrogen water was quite effective, both in the hydrogen gas in the placebo as well as in the actual hydrogen water, that it was somewhat effective at decreasing the quick decline in the Parkinson's disease study. So, this is currently being being further investigated to kind of see what the situation really is, because I know some of the research were treating or doing the analysis of some of the people, and they could tell these people are getting better. These people are, there's something, these are not typical Parkinson's disease patients. There's something beneficial going on here, right? So it's interesting that insider information on that study. So we're going to have to do it again, and we're going to have to do a better study, and a longer one, of course, and hopefully this time they'll be able to make sure there's no hydrogen gas at all in the placebo.
Yeah, no, so the point being, once again to the lay people is that it didn't show much difference within the study itself, but when you compared it to the general Parkinson's population that progresses much faster than either group did in the study. So whether you were getting the control, or you were getting the active product, it was all beneficial, and that we can attribute that to the hydrogen gas, the hydrogen and water that was in there. Are there any, so you mentioned as far as foods are concerned that can increase endogenous hydrogen production? You already said anything that I guess would be good for the gut microbiome would be beneficial, so the gut microbiome can produce hydrogen. Anything else outside of that arena, or is it all just about, hey, improving the gut microbiome?
Well, I mean, the bacteria metabolizes non-digestible carbohydrates, so it goes back to your fibers, and then various drugs such as lactulose, which is quite effective for different diseases. Lactulose increases a lot of the hydrogen gas production, and in some cases, it's the increased hydrogen gas production that may actually mediate some of the beneficial effects of the drug, or like acarbose or other types of carbohydrate digestion inhibitors. Some of the cardiovascular benefits from these drugs or different things may actually be attributed to the increased endogenous production of hydrogen gas from our gut microbiome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanted to say one thing I forgot to mention when you asked about the antioxidant and the radical scavenging area. I just wanted to differentiate quickly. A lot of your antioxidants, they do just donate an electron, if you will, and so they're actually non-discriminant. I mean, they'll react. Oh, you're a radical. I'll neutralize you. I'll neutralize all of you. And you being as a cardiologist, you know that we need free radicals like nitric oxide, right? That is like the molecule of life in the most literal sense. And nitric oxide is a free radical, right? So we don't want to neutralize all free radicals. And hydrogen gas, it cannot react with nitric oxide. It's so mild. It's just this small little mild molecule that can't react with these beneficial radicals. If it's going to react with anything, it can only react with things like the hydroxyl radical, which is the most cytotoxic, damaging radical that there is. And if that reaction does occur, you simply produce water. So it's a pretty neat area that hydrogen gas is. If it's going to do anything directly as an antioxidant, it's very selective and only going after the bad ones, if you will. But most of its antioxidant activity is probably more of this signal modulation, whether increasing our body's own antioxidant self-defense system or even decreasing the amount of excessive free radicals that are produced by downregulating things like NADPH oxidase, which increases free radical production.
Fantastic. Why is it being studied so much, or why do you spend so much time over in Asia as opposed to here in the United States? What do they understand over there that we don't hear?
You know, I think a lot of it is just timing. You know, it was first started there in Asia around 2005. I mean, that's when the research first started. And then 2007, the article in Nature Medicine was published, and that's really kind of the pioneering work of all those studies. And the research is still in its infancy. I mean, there's around 1,000 scientific publications on molecular hydrogen, and a lot of that does come from Asia. But to do a good study and to publish a good study, we need to realize it takes 5 years, to do a good study. I mean, you have to. It takes several years to get the data, several years to analyze it and put the whole paper together, and then another year to actually get through the peer review process and get it published. And so you're looking at 5 years to get a good paper published, and that landmark paper in Nature Medicine is only just over 10 years old. So I would actually say that the research here is growing quite exponentially. There are some places here in America that are getting interested in it. I mean, I did some research, through some of the universities here, and also University of California. I know some professors there that are interested in it. There's some universities here where I live that are interested in doing some. They're actually working on some things right now, preliminary. I think Stony Brook University has a clinical trial registered. They're actually using the tablets that you're talking about too for cerebral infarction. And so there are some things starting here, but to get the research going, it costs money, and we need to get basically the seed money to get things going before we get the government grants. But like in Asia, China is a good example. The government's given several $1 million just for hydrogen research. So they get a lot of funds in that area, and then European scientists are getting quite interested. From the Max Planck Institute to the Slovakia Academy of Science. That's where I'm actually doing research. A lot of my research there, actually, in the Slovakia Academy of Sciences. So it is growing, and I think we'll see a lot more of it in the next few years.
I'm thinking also about when people suffer massive free radical onslaught, maybe through some kind of radiation-based procedure. Maybe they're having a CT scan, maybe they're having a nuclear cardiology scan, which I think is totally worthless. That may be a case where you're going to go to hydrogen water and do it very extensively, versus if you're just kind of watching TV on a Sunday or something like that. Although there can be as much damage done from watching a television set sitting on your couch as well. That's where I could definitely see,
Well, you're absolutely right, and in fact, a lot of my research, we just submitted an article, and there's already some published on this very thing, irradiating the heart, with 5-10 grays of radiation, and finding that drinking hydrogen-rich water is very effective at preventing the pathological damage done to the heart. We're seeing that activation in our two pathways. We have balance of that, the homeostasis of our endogenous antioxidants, right, to get that back there, improving preventing the increased inflammation, for example. Actually, we're still working on getting more data, but some of our preliminary results are showing that the hydrogen also increased the amount of coenzyme Q10 within the mitochondrial membrane, and so that's going to increase. We see higher amounts of ATP production, for example. So lots of benefits there, all from protecting the mitochondria against this radiation toxicity. Mm-hmm. So and actually in China it's a very big too, because the Chinese military they do a lot of radiation toxicology studies and have done a lot showing hydrogen is very protective. In fact, radiation is probably one of the top things that have been studied in terms of being hydrogen being a therapeutic protective molecule against radiation toxicity. You may have seen there's the hypothesis by Michael from he works with NASA, but he wrote a beautiful paper on using hydrogen water for astronauts during space travel to protect against radiation poisoning.
Wow. Fantastic. Tell me real quick, difference between a good tablet and a bad tablet of containing hydrogen, so we can get that hydrogenated water. How do we know if we're getting snake oil or versus something that's really therapeutic?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, a couple things is the in the tablets. They do contain magnesium, but it's not your normal magnesium that you get at the health food store. This is especially formulated so that it can and does react with water to produce hydrogen gas. So I guess you don't want to think, oh, magnesium, I'll just go to the health food store and grab that and throw it in the water, and there you have it. Mm-hmm. And so I guess you'd have to make sure that whatever company you're getting it from, that you trust them, that they do their research to make sure. You should be able to add it to the water and immediately start seeing a reaction. You can test the concentration of hydrogen gas using the redox titration reagent to H2 Blue from H2 Sciences. That's what they do. They specialize in measuring molecular hydrogen. That's one of the ways that you can test it. Okay. And another way, which is kind of fun, you could take the tablet, put it in the water, capture the hydrogen gas, and then light it on fire. And then you can see for yourself right there that indeed it does produce hydrogen gas. And so that's kind of fun to do sometimes.
Also. All right, that last tip, don't try that at home unless you are a scientist like Tyler LeBaron. Where can my people find out more about you and your research and what the future holds?
Well, you're welcome to visit our website. This is molecularhydrogeninstitute.com. And we list, a lot of the studies out there. If you could go to scientific studies, you'll see about 1,000 publications and try to organize them from different diseases or organs. And you can click and look to see what's been done. And we have a lot of just general information about what hydrogen is, what it isn't. Like people get confused. Oh, is this like hydrogen peroxide, which is totally different? Or is this alkaline water, totally different, right? Like what is it? And we provide that on our on the website. You're welcome to find me on Facebook, and I often just post articles. Like I was just in China. I spoke at a conference over there and posted some new pictures of what's going on in Asia. I just posted an article. I was a co-author on hydrogen therapy for ovarian cancer. So I just post updates as I can. But sure, yeah, you're welcome to find me through those mediums.
Fantastic. Tyler LeBaron, everybody, from the Molecular Hydrogen Institute. I'll put links to his information and products we recommend in our show notes. And Tyler, thank you so much. This has been another episode of the Healthy Heart Show with cardiologist Dr. Wolfson. Until next time.